The morning of my baby shower, I stood in the bathroom of my mother-in-law's house and told my reflection that everything was going to be fine. The decorations were beautiful. Pale yellow streamers, little paper stars, a table of food that my mother-in-law had spent a week preparing. 60 people were coming. My coworkers, my college friends, my aunt who had driven 4 hours from Cincinnati. I was 31 weeks pregnant. My back ached every time I stood for more than 20 minutes, and I had cried that morning getting dressed because nothing fit the way I wanted it to. But I told myself, today is a good day. Today is just about celebrating. I should have known something was wrong when my mother-in-law pulled me aside before the guests arrived. "We have a little surprise for you," she said, squeezing my arm. Her smile was the kind that didn't reach her eyes. The family wanted to do something special. I smiled back and said that sounded wonderful. I genuinely believed her. "My name is Naomi. I'm 32 years old. I'm a licensed physician assistant at a large orthopedic practice in Columbus, Ohio, and at the time of the story I had been with my husband for 4 years, married for 2. His name doesn't matter anymore, but I'll call him my husband because that's what he was, and because that title still means something to me even now, even after everything. We had built what I thought was a good life. We owned a house, a 3-bedroom colonial in a quiet suburb, close to my practice and close to his family, which I now understand were not 2 separate selling points but one warning sign dressed as a convenience. I had put in $240,000 toward the down payment. My husband had contributed $60,000, which came largely from a loan his parents gave him that we later found out was never formally documented. At the time, I didn't think much of it. We were a team. What was mine was ours. I had a good job, not just financially, I loved it. I had worked hard for it. 7 years of school, 2 years of clinical rotations. The licensing exam I failed the first time and passed the second with a score my supervising physician framed and put on the break room wall as a joke, but also not a joke. I was good at my job. I was respected. I had just been offered a lead PA position at a second clinic location that our practice was opening in the spring, more responsibility, a significant raise, the kind of role you spend a decade working toward. My husband knew about the offer. He had hugged me when I told him. He said he was proud of me. What he did not tell me was that his family had a different opinion. The shower started at noon. By 12:30, the living room was full. My best friend, who is also a family law attorney, which becomes important later, was there with a gift wrapped in yellow paper and a look on her face that I would only understand in retrospect. My aunt was there, tucked into the corner of the sofa, eating a mini quiche. My coworkers from the practice had come together and bought me a stroller that I had mentioned once, offhandedly, 6 months ago. I was overwhelmed. I was happy. At 1:15, my mother-in-law clinked a glass. "We have an announcement," she said, and the room quieted. She was standing next to my husband's sister. I'll call her my sister-in-law, who had flown in from Phoenix for the occasion. They were both smiling. My husband was standing off to the side, holding a glass of sparkling cider, and he was also smiling, though his was smaller and slightly off-center, like a picture that isn't quite level on the wall. "As Naomi enters this next chapter," my mother-in-law began, "our family wants to make sure she knows she has everything she needs. So we've put together a little plan." I thought she was going to announce a meal train or offer to babysit on weekends. That was the kind of thing you said at a baby shower. That was the context. That was the room. She did not announce a meal train. What she announced, in a voice that was warm and certain and utterly without hesitation, was that I would be leaving my job after the baby was born. Not taking maternity leave. Leaving. Permanently. "We all agree," she said, looking around the room as though she had surveyed everyone present and recorded their votes, "that the baby needs a full-time mother. And we've talked about it as a family, and we feel that Naomi stepping back from work is the right thing. She'll have so much support. We'll be there. It takes a village, and our family is that village." The room was very quiet. I looked at my husband. He was looking at the floor. "I'm sorry," I said. And I heard my own voice come out careful and measured in the way it does when I am not yet sure if I am going to cry or scream. "Can you say that again?" My mother-in-law repeated it. She added some things, that it was for the baby's well-being, that she had stayed home with her own children, and it was the greatest gift she ever gave them. That my job was demanding and stressful and not the kind of environment a new mother should be returning to. My sister-in-law nodded along. She kept nodding the whole time, like one of those bobblehead figurines people put on their dashboards. I looked at my best friend. She was very still. Her expression was the professional neutral she uses in courtrooms, which told me everything I needed to know about what she was thinking. "Was this discussed with me?" I asked. "We wanted it to be a surprise," my mother-in-law said. "A surprise," I repeated. "A gift," my sister-in-law added. "You don't have to worry about work anymore. We're giving you permission to just be a mom." I want to be very precise about what happened in my body in that moment, because I think it matters. I didn't feel anger first. I felt something colder than anger. I felt clarity, the kind that comes when you've been squinting at something for a long time and suddenly the focus sharpens and you see it exactly as it is. I turned to my husband. "Did you know about this?" I asked. He looked up from the floor. "We talked about it as a family," he said. "We," I said. "You and your family. Did my name come up in that conversation as someone who was consulted?" He said it wasn't like that. I asked him, what was it like? He said it was just, they cared about us, about the baby, about what was best. I asked him one more question. I asked him what he thought I should do. He said, and I want you to hear this clearly, he said, "I think it would be good for our family if you took some time away from work." 60 people in that room, my aunt, my coworkers, my best friend in her courtroom face. I set down my glass of sparkling water. I smoothed my dress over my stomach where our daughter was moving, small and oblivious and entirely without opinion on the matter of my career, and I said, very quietly, that I needed a moment. I walked upstairs to the guest bathroom, sat down on the edge of the tub, and called the clinic director. I know how that sounds, I know. But here's the thing about being a person who plans. When something threatens what you've spent years building, your instinct isn't to collapse. Your instinct is to secure the foundation. I told the clinic director that I was accepting the lead PA position. I told him I would sign the offer letter that week. I told him my maternity leave would be 12 weeks as we had discussed, and that I would be back in the spring, and that I was extremely committed to the role. He sounded pleased and slightly confused about why I was calling from what sounded like a party, and I told him I would explain later. Then I called my best friend. She didn't pick up, but she was already climbing the stairs. She knocked twice and let herself in, which is the specific friendship language for, "I saw what happened and I'm here." She sat on the toilet lid and looked at me. "I need to know," I said, "if my husband can make me quit my job." "No," she said. "I need to know if his name being on the house deed gives his family any say in my employment." "No." "I need to know if any of this, the announcement, whatever they're calling this, creates any legal obligation on my part." "Absolutely not," she said. "But Naomi," she paused, "I think you need to think about what you're going home to tonight, not just today." I thought about that for a long time, sitting on the edge of that tub, with the sound of my shower guests murmuring downstairs and my daughter doing slow somersaults inside me. I went back downstairs. I thanked everyone for coming. I opened my gifts. I ate a piece of cake. I talked to my aunt about her drive and told my coworkers how much I love the stroller. I did all of it with the particular focus of someone who has decided something and is waiting for the right moment. My mother-in-law kept smiling at me. My sister-in-law kept touching my arm. My husband kept not looking at me. After the last guest left, after the streamers were still hanging and the paper stars were swaying gently from the ceiling fan, my mother-in-law started talking about the plan, how they would set up a schedule, how she would come over Tuesdays and Thursdays, how my sister-in-law could visit in the summers. I said, "I accepted the lead PA position today. I signed nothing yet, but I called to confirm, and I will be returning to work after 12 weeks of maternity leave." The room changed. My mother-in-law said slowly that she didn't think I had understood what the family had decided. I said I understood perfectly. My sister-in-law said that this was about the baby. I said that I was the baby's mother and that this was therefore about me. My husband said my name in the tone people use when they want you to calm down, which has the effect of doing the exact opposite. My mother-in-law said that she hoped I understood that if I chose my career over my family, there would be consequences. She said the word consequences very carefully, the way you say a word when you want someone to hear the weight in it. I asked her to explain what she meant. She said my husband's family had been very generous with us. The loan for the down payment, which she then referred to as a loan for the first time, out loud in front of me, could be called in, that if I was going to make decisions unilaterally, they would need to reconsider their financial involvement in our household. My best friend was still there. She had not left. I had not asked her to stay, but she had not left. She took out her phone and opened the Notes app. "Could you repeat that?" she asked my mother-in-law. "The part about the loan and the consequences." My mother-in-law looked at her. "I'm a family law attorney," my best friend said pleasantly. "I just want to make sure I have it right." That night, after my husband and I drove home in silence that was not peaceful but architectural, the kind of silence that holds something up, I sat at the kitchen table and thought about the previous 2 years. The way his family called on Sunday evenings, and the calls always lasted longer than they should have, always edged into decisions that were supposed to be ours. The way his mother had strong opinions about where we registered for our wedding, and somehow those opinions became our choices. The way I had dismissed small things as small things. The way you do when you love someone and you want the architecture to hold. I thought about the down payment, $240,000 I had saved over 8 years, starting with a weekend job in college through graduate school, through years of careful budgeting and automatic transfers, and one very difficult year when I had to choose between rebuilding my savings and taking a vacation I desperately needed, and I chose the savings because I believed in the future I was building. $60,000 from a loan that had never been put in writing, from parents who now believed that loan entitled them to veto my career. I asked my husband sitting at that kitchen table if he thought what his family had done that day was acceptable. He said they were just trying to help. I asked him if he understood that announcing to 60 of my friends and colleagues that I would be quitting my job without asking me was not helping. He said things had gotten out of hand. I asked him what he was going to do about it. He said he didn't know why I was making this into a confrontation. That was when I understood that the problem was not his family. Or it was his family, but it was also him. And the two things were not separate, and had probably never been separate, and had been treating them as separate for 2 years because it was easier. I called my best friend at 11 o'clock that night. I told her I needed to understand my options. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I've been doing some thinking since I left. There are a few things we should look at." The first thing we looked at was the deed. My name was on it. So was my husband's. The $60,000 from his parents had no promissory note, no formal documentation, no recorded lien. In the eyes of the state of Ohio, it was a gift, not a loan. His mother's declaration at the shower did not change the legal reality. The second thing we looked at was my employment contract. I had one. It was solid. My employer could not be influenced by my husband's family, and my decision to accept or decline a position was mine alone. The third thing we looked at was what kind of marriage I wanted. That last one my best friend handed back to me without analysis. Over the next 2 weeks, I documented everything. My friend advised me to, and I did it carefully. The texts my mother-in-law sent in the days after the shower, reiterating the family plan, asking when I would be giving notice at the clinic. The voicemail from my sister-in-law telling me that I was being selfish and that children need their mothers present, not ambitious. The conversation my husband and I had on a Tuesday evening where he told me, quietly, that he thought maybe his mother had a point. Maybe his mother had a point. I sat with that sentence for 3 days. My daughter was moving constantly by then, elbows and heels in the occasional full rotation. I would lie awake at night with my hands on my stomach thinking about what I wanted her to understand about herself, when she was old enough to understand anything. I thought about what it would mean for her to grow up watching me make myself smaller to keep the peace. I thought about what kind of woman I wanted her to become and whether the life I was living was pointing in that direction. I filed for legal separation 4 weeks after the baby shower. I want to be clear about what that was and wasn't. It wasn't impulsive. It wasn't a reaction to one bad afternoon. It was the conclusion of a long and careful accounting of a pattern that had been visible for longer than I'd admitted. An acknowledgement that the man I had married had shown me in a room full of people, that when given the choice between standing beside me and standing with his family, he would not choose me. My best friend referred me to a divorce attorney she trusted. I had 3 conversations with that attorney before I filed anything. The first conversation was about the house. The second was about custody. The third was about what I needed to feel safe. When my husband received the separation papers, he called me 14 times in one evening. His mother called 6 times. His sister sent 11 texts, 3 of which I screenshotted and forwarded to my attorney because their content was relevant to the documentation we were building. I didn't answer any of them that night. I was at my best friend's apartment eating Thai food on her couch, watching a show neither of us was actually watching. "You okay?" she asked somewhere around 9 o'clock. "I don't know yet," I said, "but I think I will be." The legal process took 8 months. My daughter was born in March, 7 pounds, 2 ounces, with a full head of dark hair and an expression of profound skepticism that I find deeply relatable. I took my 12 weeks of maternity leave. I returned to work in June as the lead PA at the new clinic location. My name is on the door, which is a small and ridiculous thing to be proud of, but I am proud of it. The house is mine. The settlement was straightforward, partly because the $60,000 cannot be legally claimed as a loan, and partly because my attorney was thorough and my documentation was meticulous, and partly because, in the end, my husband did not fight the way his family wanted him to. I think, somewhere inside the version of him I had loved, there was something that knew what had been done was wrong. That didn't fix anything, but it made the process cleaner than it might have been. My mother-in-law did not attend any of the proceedings. My sister-in-law sent one final text, which said that I had broken up a family and that my daughter would understand one day. I read it once and deleted it, and then I went and looked at my daughter in her crib and I thought, maybe you will. Maybe when you're older, you'll think about this and form your own opinion. I hope by then I'll have given you enough evidence to judge it fairly. My best friend was with me on the day I signed the final papers. We went to lunch afterward, somewhere with good pasta and a long wait, and we sat at a table by the window and talked about things that had nothing to do with any of this. Her cat, a book she was reading, whether we should take a trip somewhere in the fall. It was an ordinary afternoon. I keep thinking about that, how ordinary it was. How the world does not slow down or swell with music when you do something hard. You just do it, and then you go get pasta and you sit in the sun and you keep going. My daughter is 4 months old now. She sleeps in a crib I assembled myself on a Sunday afternoon with a YouTube tutorial and a level of determination that my best friend called unhinged but ultimately admirable. She has learned that smiling gets her what she wants, which worries me slightly as a long-term strategy, but which is currently the most effective thing I've ever seen. Every morning before I leave for the clinic, I stand in the doorway of her room for a moment. She's usually just waking up, making the small noises she makes before she fully arrives at the day. I think about the person she's going to become, this particular human who was with me through all of it, somersaulting through the worst and the clearest days of my life. I didn't leave because I was brave. I want to say that plainly, because I think there's a version of this story that turns into something inspirational, and I'm not interested in that. I left because the alternative was a life I did not recognize, built by people who had never asked for my input. I left because my daughter deserved a mother who knew what she was worth before she was old enough to ask. I signed the offer letter on a Wednesday. I signed the final divorce decree on a Tuesday. Both times I used the same pen, a cheap ballpoint I found in my work bag. I have no idea why I noticed that, But I did, and somehow it felt like the same signature on two different versions of the same document, the record of a woman who decided to keep her life. I keep a cheap ballpoint pen in the top drawer of my desk at the clinic. Most people wouldn't notice it. It's the kind of pen you find at the bottom of a work bag, unremarkable, half-used. But I know what it signed. And some mornings, when I sit down before my first patient arrives, I look at it and think about how the smallest objects can hold the weight of the biggest decisions. What happened to me wasn't unusual. That's what took me the longest to understand. There was no villain in a dramatic sense. No single moment of cruelty I could point to and say, that's where it started. It started in the ordinary accumulation of small surrenders. A phone call that went a little too long, an opinion that became a decision, a down payment that quietly became leverage. The pattern was there the whole time. I just kept choosing to see each piece separately instead of seeing what they added up to. I think about that a lot now. The difference between what is happening and what we tell ourselves is happening. My mother-in-law didn't stand up at my baby shower and announce my resignation out of malice. She genuinely believed she was giving me a gift. That's the part that used to confuse me, and now it's the part I understand most clearly. People can cause real harm while believing entirely in their own good intentions. Recognizing that isn't cynicism, it's just paying attention. What saved me, and I mean that plainly, not dramatically, was three things working together. The first was that I knew what I had built and refused to pretend I hadn't built it. 8 years of savings, 2 board certifications, a career that I had chosen deliberately, not fallen into. When someone tells you to walk away from the thing you worked for, the honest response isn't gratitude. Knowing that and being willing to say it out loud in a room full of people is not easy, but it is right. Integrity isn't just about big moral moments. It's about whether you're willing to tell the truth when the truth is inconvenient for everyone present, including yourself. The second was that I saw it clearly when I needed to most, not coldly. I cried in that bathroom. I sat on the edge of that tub and felt every bit of what was happening. But I also made a phone call and then another, and I asked the right questions and I listened to the answers. Intelligence isn't the absence of feeling. It's the ability to feel everything and still figure out what needs to be done next. The third was that I kept going when going was genuinely hard. The 8 months of legal proceedings, the nights when my daughter was newborn and I was exhausted and the end still felt far away. The moment I drove home to a house that was technically half someone else's and had to make dinner and answer emails and be a functioning person. That's what endurance actually looks like, not a single act of courage, but the decision, repeated every single ordinary day, to stay in motion. My daughter will ask me about this someday. I don't know exactly what I'll say, but I think I'll tell her that the story isn't really about what her grandmother announced at a party or about a man who didn't speak up when he should have. The story is about a woman who had spent years building something real, who was asked to pretend it didn't exist, and who decided, quietly, in a bathroom with a cheap pen and a phone, that she wouldn't. That's the whole thing really, the pen, the phone call, the decision to keep going.